And here we are, and we are live. And as the birds are singing over in my singing clock, which is the one thing I forgot to turn off, I'd like to welcome everyone to this wonderful panel that I have set up for you guys today. I'm super excited about it. I've collected some wonderful people who are authors who are willing to share their secrets and their insights and all their good info that I know we all need. But I'd like to welcome you to this office hour, which is part of Social Media Pulse, and the community is wonderful, and I hope you go over there. You can see the link scrolling across the bottom there, and that's where we'll be having the conversation after this live event. Of course, if you're over on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook or any of those places and YouTube, I will be able to see your comments and answer your questions, and I would love to see them, and I'm happy to ask anybody any of the questions that come in. So thank you so much for being here. Since I'm an author myself, I thought it would be fun to just kind of tease out some wonderful insights about being an author and how it impacted my business as a social media manager and teacher and educator. So now I'd like to welcome everyone onto the stage, and we're just going to put everyone on there. It's Mike and Corey and John and Andrea and Kelly and Brad. And I'm so happy you're all here, and thank you so much for joining us today. We have several questions we're going to go through. And we're going to try and get out some great information. We also have, just so you know, two people who were unable to join us, but they sent us recordings, and we're going to put those up and see their answers to these questions. So, hello, everyone. Are you ready to get this thing started?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So this is really great. So this is round one. This is the first question I want to ask everyone. And I'll call your name and tell you, it's your turn to talk, but please just add to the conversation anytime you want. So let's start with this, because really it's one of the most asked questions that we have to authors. And the question is it worth it to write a book these days? And I'm going to start with Andrea on this one.
Center square. I take the center square for. That's really dating me right there. So yes, I absolutely think it's worth it to write a book. It gives you authority. It gives you something to talk about, something to point to, something to sell if you're a speaker, a way that people discover you in a new way. Because, people will find my book on Amazon and then they're like, oh, I read your book and now I want to work with you a little bit more. So I think it's absolutely worth it to publish a book these days.
That's awesome. Check for that vote. So what about you, Corey?
Yeah, 100%. I have had so much fun just writing the book and getting to know other authors like you. But just like Andrea said, I mean, it definitely gives you more clout and authority. And now, anytime I'm, pitching, going on a podcast, I throw out, oh yeah, I wrote Instagram for Dummies. And then it's kind of like, boom, okay, you're on, so it's definitely a door opener.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And you can say I wrote the book on Instagram, right? So
exactly. Yeah,
that's great. So what I'd like to do now is try one of our recordings. And again, this is something new to us. So we're going to push a button and see if magically we can get Jenn answering this first question.
I still think there's value in writing a book. I think it's definitely different now than it was, 5, 10, and definitely, 15, 20 years ago, because things evolve so quickly. But even writing these Dummies books, when we're talking about Instagram and how literally by the time we sent it to the publisher, we probably had changes to screenshots already. So it does change so quickly. But a lot of things we put in there are very evergreen content. And from my perspective, I have so many people that meet me at a conference or that, hear me on a podcast or find me through a webinar or something. And they are really just getting started and they're not going to pay my hourly fee for training and they're not going to have an opportunity to get in-depth training. So having a book is a resource that's super affordable that I can get to them and say, go get this to get trained and learn all the basics and then they can come work with me. So there's absolutely still advantages to having those resources. And I think it's something that that they know has been vetted, that they know is going to work. And it definitely can help them with that confidence if it's something they're starting new.
Great. So, and she brought up some really great points about it almost being like an introductory course before working with someone as a coach or a mentor like that. And Andrea, I had to laugh because you and I know very well what happens when you have a book written and then Facebook decides to change everything
Yeah.
as it's going to print. So,
Yeah.
do you remember that back in the day?
Yeah, we had to rewrite it in like we had to rewrite the whole book in like 2 months or something, or like in a month or something before, because they made a giant update. We were like, how many times do we have to write this? I don't know.
I remember that well. It was a fairly stressful time.
Yeah.
All right. So, Mike, let us know about this first question here about, is it worth it to write a book?
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that's been said so far. And I would just add that for some authors, for some of us even, the act of writing the book ended up being a bit of an exercise in codifying
Yeah.
what do we think about this topic? How informed are we really? How are we framing our thoughts? Because I know, like in my experience with influencer marketing, I wrote a whole chapter in our book about that. And it really helped me kind of formalize how I approach that topic, even though it's something I've been doing for years. And that then led to the authority and the speaking and everything else that everyone else has mentioned.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know how many people here are dummies writers, but when they sent the style guide and they said how to do the bullet points and how to do the paragraphs and what to start each bullet point with, my whole brain had to be reorganized. It was not just this free flow, let's write about Facebook. It was engineer-like, right?
Yeah, it just made me a better writer overall.
Yeah.
And to Mike's point, that you just not only formulate your thoughts, but you just get good at writing because you know, and I didn't like writing before.
That's so funny. Okay, Jon, what are your thoughts? Is it worth it these days?
Yes, I agree with everybody. I just wanted to, Phyllis, ask when you say a book, is it like the wonderful Facebook marketing for dummies like Andrea has in the back there, or is it an ebook or a guide? I mean, it's encompassing the whole
thing.
Book writing concept. Is that the question?
The whole thing, like any book, like a traditional published book, a self-published book, an ebook,
Right.
any way a book comes around. What is it?
Okay, yeah. And the reason why I ask is from a marketing perspective and a business perspective overall, it's all about building the know, like, and trust, as we know, right? And so when I think about positioning your brand or your company or you as an individual or influencer, as Mike was talking about, having a book, whether it's an e-guide or something that you use as a lead magnet for a deeper funnel, etc. I know I'm getting into some specifics here, but it really builds out the know, like, and trust. And when I got my book deal several years ago through Entrepreneur Magazine, Entrepreneur Press, I didn't think of myself as an author at that time, but I had been writing and being engaged in that space for a while. And when the book came to fruition, it just added that extra layer to build out the know, like, and trust. So when I was on calls or presentations and you bring up the fact that you're an author, oh my God, you're an author, it just elevates it big time. So I would say absolutely yes, consider a book and do it now. Don't wait.
That's a great point, and it's true. There's lots of layers to this, and so what about you, Brad? What do you think about? Is it worth it to write a book?
Well, first off, I want to say how embarrassed I am to have actually understood Andrea's reference at the top.
I know, right?
I got it.
Oh man, I gotta tell you,
You
that
youngins
brought
don't
back some
know.
really bad memories. Talk about aging. Anyway, I definitely think it's worth it to write a book these days. I think with this new Chat GPT craze, there's going to be some question at least in the immediate future, as to whether people are actually writing the book or whether they're using Chat GPT to write the book. And I've actually seen some people posting short stories and things that say human written or a human wrote this at the top to say that. But absolutely, for all the reasons that everybody has already said, the trust, the credibility, my books are like business cards. I'll take one of them to a meeting with a prospect, if it's, you know, in line with what we're talking about, and give that instead of a business card. I mean, if anybody gives business cards anymore. Anyway, a big book is something that you can't just throw in the trash at so definitely for all the reasons people said, that trust and credibility piece, though, is really the biggest thing, I think, for me.
Yeah, that's great. And Andrea, we couldn't just drop one of our Facebook marketing all-in-one for dummies because it's like 5, 6, 7 pounds.
No, that is
It
true.
would-
700 pages plus,
Yeah,
whatever. It's like,
so funny.
yeah.
So what I'd like to do is I'd like to jump over to
Kelly.
Yeah, I'll just hang out. It's fine.
I
love listening to y'all.
No. I'm
I want
going
to
to
hear
do
about
Fiona.
non-business.
I'm going to do
Oh, you're-
Fiona, then Kelly,
know,
then
right?
me, and
I was
because I have
worried you
some
were going
thoughts,
on.
and
Yeah.
then we'll go to the next question.
Okay.
So let's go to Fiona and see her answer for this.
I love you, Andrea.
I just wanted to make
Is
sure.
it worth writing a book? Absolutely it is. Look, I think one of the things is don't just write a book because someone says, oh, you should write a book. You know, you want to have the motivation to actually write a book because you have something to say. You want to be able to show your authority, share your stories. And we've all got stories we want to tell. If you want to change the world, you won't change it by doing nothing. So write about it, talk about it, and get that book out there. And that will really help to kickstart the momentum around whatever it is that you're trying to do.
That's great. So here's the deal. If you guys on the panel are seeing that those videos kind of stagger and skip, that's just our view. In the video, it actually turns out very smooth. So if anybody is seeing that, no worries. We got it under control. Now on to Kelly. So
Yay.
Kelly.
I was just enjoying all the talk. So I think it is worth it, but I think it's a different dynamic today, as many have brought up. I remember longer than I want to admit ago, I started wanting to write a book like 14 years ago, and I never did it. And back in my day, it really was an expensive business card. It was really a door opener. And while I think that still exists, there are other door openers that are available to us. But the cool thing about writing a book is when you do write a book, it's like peeling the Band-Aid off and letting the floodgates out. I was fortunate to write a dummies book, and unfortunate, I guess, to write the book that nobody wants to get, because it's the digital etiquette book. So like,
You need
it's
this.
the one that needs it, but like be gentle. But after I wrote that book, I went on to write 3 children's books, self-published, just because I fell in love with the process of writing. And I'm also working on a poetry book. I do want to, because it was brought up, and I do train on AI. So I get questions a lot about if I use AI to write my books, and I don't. But I agree that this is going to become quite an interesting dynamic. And this is a discussion we're having in the communities that I run. And obviously, this isn't the place to really dive in, but just be aware that that is something that is going to take place. And I do want to state that we as experts still hold a very important place in this world, because the AI can like refresh and regurgitate what is out there. But we as experts need to fill in those blanks, and we still will become, it'll be important that we are producing books and content out there.
Yeah, really, truly, we could have this entire panel discussion just
I
on
know.
this one
Another
topic,
day.
right? And which would be awesome. So, I'm sure that one's in the works for the future. And I too agree that it's worth it to write a book. I don't know if it's worth it to write a traditionally published book, as that's fairly challenging. Also, on anything topical, that's very challenging. But if you have an evergreen topic and it's something that has high impact with a lot of people, then yes, I think absolutely writing a book now is really important. I also think that if someone is a very good blogger, that they also have that like, know, and trust thing, right? And so maybe, that whole process of writing blogs is just as important as writing a book. But there is something quite wonderful to hold a physical book in your hand that you had a part of. And so I agree with that. All right, so now we're moving on to the second question, round 2. Let's get boots on the ground for a moment, like you guys are floating up in the air or something, I don't know, but let's definitely get boots on the ground. So now that you've published your books, would you do it the same way again? And I'm actually going to start this time with Jenn. Oh, Ruth, I saw you like, what? Wait, pushing a
I
button.
have the luxury of having co-authors, and absolutely I would do that again. I don't know if I'd ever write a book on my own to that same level. Having co-authors, being able to split up the workload, knowing that, if I've got commitments that they can, pull a little extra duty to meet the deadline so we still complete deadlines without the overwhelm of responsibility falling entirely on my shoulders. So in that way, absolutely, I would do it again the same way.
Which brings up Corey, because Corey, you are a co-author with Jenn. So
Yes.
how do you feel about that? Would you do it the same way again with co-authors, or would you prefer to do a solo book, or what's your feeling on that?
Well, I echo what Jenn said in that having 3 of us, because we have one other co-author, is amazing. And we've done 4 books together. So now we're just like, boom, it's, I won't say it's easy, but it does get easier. And we work really well together. And we pick up, where someone else left off. I mean, we have our own chapters, but it's really helpful to have 2 other people that are not only experts, but are very responsible and, get everything in on time. And I know that they're already thinking about like the next edition of Instagram for Business for Dummies. So yes, I will be doing that again. But like one of the other authors mentioned, I think, I can't remember now. One of the other authors mentioned that, it has gotten me to a point where I'm more comfortable writing. So I have written a couple ebooks. Yes, Kelly, I thought it was you. You were raising your hand. So it's gotten me writing other things, shorter things. I wouldn't write. I don't think I could write a dummies book by myself, to be honest.
I wouldn't want to.
I mean, there's a lot of dummies authors out here that would probably say the same thing. It's a lot. But would I do it again with my 2 co-authors? Absolutely.
So that's actually funny, because I did write a dummies book all by myself, and it just about killed me. But it was also the thing that encouraged me to figure out my time management. And that time management piece became a major part of my business going forward. So it sort of broke me and recreated me all in the same thing. Both Andrea and I have written together with co-authors and separately as solo authors. So Andrea, what do you think about this?
Yeah, so I have a couple of funny stories about the Dummies series as well. And I remember when we were writing the book with Amy Porterfield and you and I, Phyllis, and it was our first time experience writing a Dummies the Dummies book, and they were really hardcore in the deadlines. And that's what I think was super helpful. And I remember Amy said, "Oh, guys, I'm so behind. I'm so behind. And I just can't, I'm not going to be able to get it in." And it was like a noon deadline we have. She's like, "I'm going to ask for an extension." And so she asked them, and they said, "Yeah, you can have an extension. You have until 5 p.m.
Oh my gosh.
So it does, it's really hardcore. So and actually I published 3 different ways. So we did the Dummy series. I self-published this one, Facebook Ads Made Simple. And then we did a group one, Phyllis and I, with a bunch of other authors, where we each contributed a chapter. And this is also self-published. And I think they all have their value. The Dummies one for sure got it out. I mean, you just hit those deadlines. When you're self-publishing, those deadlines can slide. And so what I did to actually help me hit my deadline is I promised a speaking client that I would have 100 copies for them. And I was airlifting those copies out to them, but I got it done. So there's advantages of doing it different ways, because and then the group one was nice because we all just had to do a short segment. But I think also we didn't promote that one in the same way that we did. And so that one probably sold the least out of all the books I've done. So, there's just advantages to doing it different ways. And I think the Dummies series and self or published or a traditional publishing house can have a little bit more weight to it, but Not always if it's got value in the self-publishing as
Yeah,
book
I
as well.
totally, absolutely agree with that. And I think Fiona talked a little bit about this. So why don't we go ahead and hear from Fiona, who, by the way, it's 3:00 in the morning in Australia, and
I love
hopefully she's asleep.
Fiona.
Would I do it exactly the same way again now? Possibly not. The current venture that I'm in at the moment, we are doing it a different way. So I'll talk about that a little bit later too. But yeah, as it is, self-publishing I think is an amazing thing to do. I would be a little bit more aware of things now than when I first ever published. And certainly if you have if you want to get a publisher behind you and submit your book to get published, it wasn't something I even considered back then. And I guess that was a little bit of me just second guessing myself and thinking, I'm still not quite worthy enough or something like that, which was really crazy because I'm pretty sure I could have submitted it and it would have been picked up, to be honest.
Yeah, she mentions that imposter syndrome, which I know all of us have probably had at some point or another and had to deal with. So let's start with Kelly for this one in terms of, so would you do it the same way again?
Absolutely not. So to be fair, my first book was the Dummies book, and we had probably the tightest deadline I've ever heard of in my life. We wrote an entire book in just over a month and a half. It was intense. They wanted this thing out first quarter of last year, and we started writing in November. So it was insane. And I liked it for that sense because it did force me to just do it. And I'm glad it was that part I'm actually glad of. But it's that it was so rushed that we really didn't, as a marketer, it killed me in a sense because we did not properly promote this book. And still to this day, we are not properly promoting this book because it's kind of, a year has passed and we've got other things. So with that, if I did another Dummies book, which I would love, because again, what other people have echoed, I loved working with Kendra Luce and Eric, just great team. And I would love to continue to, do teamwork with that. And the Dummies do make it easy in a sense that they give you that structure, which I love, but I would never rush a book like that again. It was too intense. And the marketing to me was lackluster. And that was partly our fault as authors. We didn't really have, the time, and we were exhausted by the end, honestly. And I was in the middle of moving my family to Texas. So I would never do it during a move. That was too much. But on the side of when I did self-publishing, I would do self-publishing over and over and over and over again, because it just gave me so much freedom to be super creative. So there's two sides of it. And it's just really, what is your vibe? What are you going for? I would do the publisher again. I just wouldn't rush it again. If that makes sense.
And try and negotiate that. I also had to write a book in 30 days, and then it sat on a shelf inside the publishing house for 5 months.
Oh no.
And then I said, I'd like to, revise this thing because it's social media. It's social media marketing, e-learning kit for dummies. It needs an update. And they said, no.
Oh no.
So yeah, it can be challenging. So what about you, Brad? Would you do it the same way again?
I love this question because it really actually made me think about the answer. And I'm not sure, to be honest with you. So the first book that I wrote was sort of a compilation. So there were a lot of other people's comments and ideas and thoughts in it. And that was certainly a little easier to put together. And the publisher of that book was wonderful to work with. The second book that I wrote was with a traditional publisher, and it had the deadlines and all of that. And that was not as great of an experience for me, mainly after the fact, with the promotion and all the things that come up and that we're going to talk about a little later, that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. So I probably would not go that route again, just because I had such a bad experience, unless it was, I don't know. I can't even envision a way that I would do that again. The self-publishing idea would definitely be the way that I would, try this next time around.
That's very interesting. I wish I'd kept count on the votes, who would be more interested in self-publishing and who would be more interested in traditional publishing. But it's a very interesting split or mix of reactions. And I guess how you are as an author would also play into what type you would like to do. So what about you, Jon? Do you think you would do it the same way again?
Yeah, I would say no. And the main reason is, I think, and just to be totally transparent, I was a little bit sort of shell shocked that I got such a big book deal, and I'm an author and all this things that I talked about. But it was sort of self-serving in a sense, like egotistical, like, oh, look at me, I'm an author. Now, as Ogilvy says, your customer is not a moron, she's your wife, right? So now it's all about writing to my audience and serving the customer, and whichever topic that happens to be or segment of the marketplace. It's all about self-publishing now for me. I would never go the same route, although I love the entrepreneur folks and they did wonders for my career. I just absolutely would do it differently now. And so that's the summary. Yeah.
That's great insights and all of that. Thank you. And then Mike, let's have you close up this particular segment. And would you do it the same way again?
Well, like Corey, I was a co-author with Jenn. We wrote the entrepreneur's book on social media marketing, and I was nodding along with Jenn. Yeah, thank you, Kelly's got it. Thank you, hype girl. So I was nodding along with Jenn because so much of it was easier having multiple co-authors. For me, the hardest, most challenging part, the thing that I don't ever want to do again, was working with their editing team. Yeah. And I'm assuming it was probably the same as if I was working with any other, like the For Dummies series and so on, where not only are they editing your voice and your work, they're trying to keep you rigid along with their style guidelines, and they're trying to keep all of your co-authors along the same voice, because you don't want somebody reading this book and every chapter sounds like somebody else wrote it, even though somebody literally did. Somebody else wrote that. I just remember having so many battles with their editor because I have a certain way that I talk, a certain way that I write. And that was a real challenge for me. I started one chapter with a story about Mark Twain and a company out of Toledo, Ohio. And I didn't want to reveal Mark Twain's identity until the end of the chapter. I wanted this open loop throughout the whole chapter. I had to fight with them to keep that open loop there. And I'm like, why are we fighting about this? Why are we going back and forth over this? And so that was just one of many stories that made it just so much of a challenge for me, that I think the next book will either be self-published, or if it's with a traditional publisher, it'll be just me, and it won't be, one where they're putting out multiple books in the same format, so they all have to be the same.
Great insight on
Can
that.
I add to that really quick? I'm
Sure,
sorry, 'cause
absolutely.
he nailed it, something for me too, that while I enjoyed having an editor, because I have dyslexia, and trust me, everything I've self-published, I will end up like republishing because I will always find a mistake. I actually got into it with our editor a couple times, not because of voice, but because of expertise. Because I'm telling them this is like, I'm writing my expertise, and they're like, this doesn't happen. And I'm like, I am telling you, you will not take this out. It happens. It's staying in the book. Like we went rounds.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And honestly, I would love to take you all to the bar and hear some of these stories. That would be super awesome. Yeah. So I think I know the answer to this next question. We're on round 3, and that is, have you leveraged your book into building a better and or more profitable business? I'm pretty sure I know the answer to that. And if you could just give us one little example of how that happened for you. And I'm going to start with Andrea.
Yeah, I mean, it for sure. The book, I think, was just and Phyllis was the one who got me the book deal, just FYI. Phyllis is responsible for all of my success. But yeah, for sure. I think it's led to a whole different thing. It also just even up-leveled my own mindset around what's possible. So, absolutely.
That's awesome. And I think you probably had a lot to do with your own successful living here. Because anybody who would put on a wig and be Grandma Mary to catch my attention. That's all you. That's all on you. So, and if you don't know what reference that is, you haven't been in this business long enough. So here we go. So Corey, has this really advanced your business through time?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, the imposter syndrome is real. So once you have that book, it's kind of like the tangible piece, like, no, you're making it. It's happening. Yeah. So the other thing, like, I will throw that book on if I'm pitching a new client, it's like, oh, by the way, I wrote Instagram for Dummies and Instagram for Business for Dummies, and that definitely levels up, your name at the top of the pile. So, so yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you. And how about you, Jon?
Yeah, so this is interesting because initially I didn't think it did much. I mean, yes, I got exposure and from SEO, the trust and the links and the entire space centered around authority building was great, but I couldn't say, oh, look at this, another deal just came in on my desk and I signed that and closed that. It was not as simple. It felt like it was more of a definitely my issue there for probably not promoting as hard. But then I also leaned on the publisher to do more of that, and they did and they didn't. That's another topic there. But it was probably a second or third wave of that was helpful, where I could be on a conversation, and I typically work on larger deals, and I talk to the CEO or the executive, and oh, and by the way, I have this book. Oh, really? And then that added that extra additional sort of oomph to the conversation. Oh, this guy is an authority. Clearly, he must know what he's talking about. So in that regard, it helped close more deals, but not necessarily initially. And I think that was probably a combination of several issues. But yeah, that's sort of my take on that one.
Yeah, so it's either the book is known well enough that people seek you out because of it, or
Yes.
you bring it up in conversation and it elevates the thing. So that's great. So how about Brad? Has it made your business bigger and more profitable?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has. It's always nice to have, 50 books with you when you go on a speaking engagement. I use the book in smaller group settings to get people to ask questions. And I'll say, oh, here's my book. And then everybody knows that you've written a book. And first person to ask a great question is going to get a copy.
Nice.
Things like that. But I've also had people call me and say, I understand you wrote a book on inbound marketing and I need help with inbound marketing. Are you the guy? And I'm like, well, I wrote the book.
How many times have we said that? Just a show of hands. How many people said, oh, I wrote the book?
Absolutely. I wrote the book on inbound marketing. I mean, forget those HubSpot people that invented it. I wrote the book.
I love that.
So yeah, it's definitely helped me, build my business in many different ways, for sure.
That's great. So why don't we go ahead and see what Jenn says about this? I have a feeling I know what she's going to say.
I mean, for me, it was key to success. Being able to say that you've literally written the book on Instagram is a good way to, get your name out there, to get on more stages, to be invited to podcasts. And I've literally had people invite me to be on their podcast when the notifications go out, when I say, the new book is coming, and they're like, great, will you be on the podcast? So it's absolutely given me a larger platform. It's given me way more opportunities to be able to speak, to, like I said, do podcasts, to work with more people and reach more people as an audience in general by having the book behind me.
I totally agree with that. And so what do you think, Kelly? Has this built your business?
I'm going to be the contrarian here and say no.
It's totally okay.
Yeah, and there's a very specific reason why. I wrote, I'm a co-author for Digital Etiquette for Dummies, but I'm known for chat marketing and content marketing. So it's not like I'm booking, etiquette speaking events. I make more I get more oomph. I land more clients. You know, I get paid better because of my YouTube channel and because of my association with the main brand that I train on, which is ManyChat, and because I was awarded, you know, top educator of the year. If I would have written the book on chat marketing, hell yeah, that would have helped my business. But this is more of a nice to have for me as an ego boost, for me as a life goal. This was huge. It's just nice to be able to say, yeah, I'm a published author, but has it like expanded my business? I can't say it has, but that's simply because of the nature of the category of book that I wrote. And I'm fine with that. But if anyone's out there wanting to, you know, use me for my expertise, other than etiquette, call me.
Which brings the point up that, you know, we all still have to work to build our businesses. It's not going to magically happen. And I think Andrea would agree with me on this one, is that we did use the book to build Social Media Manager School. And that was really kind of a key thing. And it was very, very important to do that. But also, you know, Amy built her business based off of this book too. And now she has nothing to do, really a lot to do with Facebook. So she did start the foundation of building her business from the book, but then moved on. And that's totally a cool thing to do. Everybody gets to build their business the way they want. You know, everybody's their own boss. So let's hear what Fiona has to say about if the books have helped her leverage a bigger business.
I started a whole cyber safety arm of my business, and you know, it was absolutely phenomenal for me right then. At the moment, I've kind of moved a little bit more in towards reputation and stuff with adults again, and in particular AI and ethics. But I certainly hope that the projects that I do in future and any books that I write will indeed just add into my success and help me to continue to build my business.
So there was a lot in there that, again, that whole thing about AI and stuff that we really should have a whole nother discussion about. But I want to go ahead and I think, did I miss
Wait, did
Mike?
Mike? Yeah, Mike. We didn't hear from Mike. Yeah.
Mike, I should know that because I have a checklist because this is how my brain works. Mike, tell us this about building your business based off of the books.
Yeah, I definitely agree that being that published author adds that panache, you know, that Cyrano's white plume to your cap. But I love something that Corey mentioned, which is about the imposter syndrome. And I don't know if it's just me, but I have this very vivid perception in my mind of a difference between self-publishing and traditional publishing in terms of the work and the time that goes into it. I feel like self-publishing is easier. And having self-published multiple books before I was published by a traditional publishing house, in my experience, at least, it was a lot easier. And so being published, like, honestly, for real, was what I was thinking. It felt different. It felt like, okay, I really made it. I really did this. I achieved this thing, whatever that was.
Those are great points on that whole thing, and which is very interesting to me. Again, imposter syndrome is something that we could do a whole panel discussion on. I think it's one of those things that most entrepreneurs, not everyone, but most entrepreneurs will have to deal with at some point during their career, and I think it's an important thing.
I think there's something about the brand recognition. You're tying yourself to a brand. And I don't know I think for sure the Dummies brand is super recognizable. Entrepreneur, a very recognizable brand. And so I don't know, there's something about that as well that I think, makes us talk about it in a different way.
Yeah, very interesting. So I'm going to start this next one off. The question is basically, most authors realize, if not the first book, but by the second book, that they have to do a lot of the marketing to make sure this thing is successful. And so
everybody nods.
Everybody nods. And the good thing, I'll tell you one old story, and that is that when we were publishing the first book, me and Andrea and Amy, on Facebook Marketing All-in-One for Dummies, we had it on pre-order. And of course, he had 3 marketers marketing this thing heavy because it was our first book for all of us. And we got so many pre-orders that they decided to put us on the A-list marketing tier or something. And then they put their money into marketing for us. But if we hadn't done that step, they would not have put the money and the time into marketing. So it's one of those things where it's a good thing to know a little bit about marketing if you are also an author, or to have someone on your team who understands it, which is going to come up in this next thing. So we all know we have to do the marketing, and I'd like to hear from Jenn, because Jenn mentions Mike in this little snippet.
I default to Mike Allton on this because he is the king of a launch campaign. So he's really good at this. And I've had the luxury of doing a launch campaign with him and being like, wow, that's amazing. But it's a lot of pre-launch prep. It's a lot of, teasing it out. And it was unboxing the box of books when it arrived and posting videos about that. It's having it literally tangibly in your hands and taking photos with it and teasing it out. We all know that pre-sales are super important to a book's performance, especially on platforms like Amazon. So getting people excited about it to be able to go pre-purchase, to get those initial orders in, is super important leading up to the launch. So launch isn't like, oh, the book's available today. It really does start weeks in advance with all of that. We did kind of virtual book tours as well, whether it was going on podcasts and talking about the book, whether it was doing our own events virtually, and creating, whether it's like a little mini webinar, or we did AMAs, you ask me anything type situations, going live on Instagram, going, live on various platforms to talk about the book and get people excited about it. So those are some of the best kind of things that I would recommend. And then whatever else Mike Allton says.
So anything Mike says. So Mike, she put a lot of kudos on you for all of that pre-launch marketing. So can you share your tips and secrets with us?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that too could be a whole nother show, but she summarized it really well. And it's about having a launch plan that you've actually thought through and you've figured out in advance. All right, this is the day we're launching. Here are all the things that we need to do and the timeline to do them in advance. Because, like, for instance, one of the things that we did really well that I obviously love doing is working with influencers. We were really blessed to be doing a marketing book, and we're all of us authors were super connected in the marketing community. Some of the people here on this call were part of our launch plan. So these were people that we reached out to a month and a half in advance of the launch, right? And we got their buy-in to help us launch it. We fed them graphics, materials, assets, everything that they would need, and then had a very specific scheduled date. On this date, August 20th, 2020, or whatever it was, this is when we're launching, right? And we had a Facebook group, an email to coordinate it all. So it wasn't just me talking about my new book. We had literally an army of marketers telling their audiences about the new book.
Yeah, that's great. And it's true. We could have a whole panel discussion just on the marketing and launch plans and all the
And you
things.
should.
And so that people could just, download this and set it up, make it a checklist, right? So there are podcasts and book tours and AMAs and all these things, and using influencers. There's quite a long list of things that you could add to that book launch. So it's true. So what do you think, Andrea, in terms of marketing?
Yeah, I mean, like Mike and Jenn said a lot of the great things you can do. I mean, I just want to talk about advertising it as well, because that is a difficult path to be profitable with something like Facebook ads or Instagram ads with a book that costs like, $20 or $25 or whatever it might cost. But I still think it's a valuable exercise to just get that visibility out there in all different ways. And hopefully you've already built your email list that is also a great way to get the word out and things like that. A lot of people do bonus content for people who buy early or whatever. That's kind of a fun thing. There's tons of ideas. And I think whatever you can do to get that buzz built up, and and that's why the Dummies series will have their authors on, because they already have a built-in audience, an email list and followers and stuff like that, so they know they're going to have some of those sales.
Yes, and I will actually spill the beans on a little secret here. Is if you're looking for a traditional book publishing gig, you should really build your platform big, and especially if you're going to have co-authors on this, because even though, as Andrea says, I brought the book deal to the group, But my platform was the smallest out of everyone. So I did not get the lead author position. So those traditional publishers, they will put lead author as a person with the biggest platform. Just a little tip there. So what do you think about that, Corey, in terms of marketing?
Yeah, my big thing, well, I would do teasers along the way while I was writing it. So I would even just, as you know, like on Instagram stories, I would just post a shot of me, like maybe in a coffee shop. Oh, I'm writing chapter 3, you know. So I was trying to tease it out, you know, like months in advance, just showing like, oh, you're going to be excited about this. And then the other thing that I do a lot of is podcast guesting. So I have just, you know, like lately, our latest Instagram for Dummies just dropped in December. So I'll go on like 2 podcasts a week and just try to get the word out that way and leverage their audience. And then it also, you know, they're asking me a bunch of questions about Instagram. So it's leveraging me as, you know, the expert. So that's what I've been doing, a ton of podcast guesting.
That's a great tip, and I think everyone should be working that if they have a new book or a new launch or a new product or anything out. Podcasts are the way to go. So what do you think, Brad, about this marketing bit?
I think that for my next book, I'll be hiring Mike to handle the launch.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, I mean, I think, you know, everybody's really covered most of it. I think my tip, though, would be if you're going the traditional marketing or the traditional publishing route, you need to have a mindset that you are 100% responsible for the marketing.
Yes.
No matter what they tell you.
Yes.
And you need to plan the launch, and you need to tap into your own networks, and you need to use your email, and you need to go on the podcast, and you need to do all of those things regardless of what they tell you. And I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but my experience was not the best in that promises were made about, you know, you're going to be #1 bestseller on Amazon on the first day. And I was, but it had nothing to do with them. It had absolutely nothing to do with them because they didn't do anything that day. So my biggest, you know, tip is you need to take responsibility for the marketing of your book, regardless of what anybody else tells you.
That's great. Always take 100% responsibility for yourself in all areas of your life. That's awesome. So, John,
also,
how do you?
I also want to just share that some people think you're going to get rich off your book. I want to just kind of X that out right now. Just no,
There is
I don't
no
care if
money
you're
in
a
that.
bestseller. I don't care where you're at. Everyone's like, "Oh, you're a Dummies author. You're probably just rolling in royalties."
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"Oh,
I don't even get paid royalties. We
Right.
do all that.
I'm
Oh
just
my
shocked that it
goodness.
took
Afford to buy
48
my
minutes
book.
for this to get revealed.
We just burst a whole bunch of bubbles out there in the. But
All right,
that's
on
the
that
truth.
note,
It's
maybe we should
absolutely
just
the
call
truth.
it.
And you know, it's interesting. I remember when Andrea and Amy and I realized that what we were writing was a brochure.
Yeah.
We were writing a brochure, a very, very thick, heavy brochure that we had to use to build a business. So it's super true. Good. Sorry we had to burst that bubble for you. All right, so John, what's your bit on the marketing for a successful launch?
Well, yeah. So I'll just give you an example. We used just finished a couple of weeks ago, actually, in the real estate space. So we used an ebook guide, like a 50-pager, as a lead into a 5-day challenge, and ran Facebook and YouTube ads to really build out the presence, the awareness, and you know, the whole funnel experience there. But that is a great example of using a book, or an ebook in this case, as a lead magnet, if you will, into, you know, the 5-day challenge in this example. And it's still being collected, but it's an 8x return so far. And it's a high ticket thing, right? But it really works very, very well. And you can add, you know, all kinds of little different angles to that whole thing through the funnels. But it is something that I would advocate strongly for using it to really get your message out there, your authority building and your trust building, all the things we talked about, but also to create revenue through smart funnels and useful products to segmented marketplaces, right? Not just spew it all over the place like spray and hope that it works, but get really, really specific using those e-guides.
That was gold. Thank you so much for that, Jon. And if you're watching this as a recording, just make sure you sort of rewind and re-listen to that, because I think that would be super helpful for everyone. So Kelly, what's your take on this marketing bit?
Oh gosh, I have to agree with Brad so much on this. I went into this and I thought they were going to help us with the marketing, and everything I thought never happened. I unfortunately wrote my book, like I said, during a time when my life was in upheaval and I did not have time to properly put attention to this. So it was very difficult and actually very frustrating, because even our book was released on Amazon like days earlier than we were told, and the only reason we knew that is because our friends were posting photos of it on social media. So I was like, WTF, guys. So yeah, I 100% agree with Brad. Like, if you are out there and you're like, I want to publish a book with a publishing a traditional publisher, cool, awesome, but don't think that they're going to do your marketing. You need to go in, follow the lead of our friend Mike Allton, dude, gold standard. Like literally, I was a part of their launch and I was just like in awe. You should literally go and like train people how to do that, because it was amazing. So I echo what Brad said, though. It was eye-opening, to be sure.
That's awesome. So I'm going to let Fiona close out this particular question on successful launching and how that determines your marketing.
I think it's worth networking, going to events, talking about your book. If you can do a book launch, do your book launch, maybe in a library or perhaps a local bookstore, somewhere like that, where you can actually be there, meet the people, be the face of your book, and really engage with people one-to-one. I think that's really worthwhile. Oh, and having some sort of trailer is a really good idea. I mean, I had like a free download, a free chapter back then, but I think, doing a video now would be really awesome, making sure you're letting people know about the different things that they'll learn in the book, what they're going to get out of reading the book.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, so those are all excellent points from Fiona. And so we're going to move to round 5. And I am super curious about the answer to this particular question. I think I sort of know the answer based on a previous question. So maybe we can just answer this one with a quick yes or no and why or why not. And that would be, are you working on your next book, and why or why not? And I'm starting with Andrea.
Yeah, I actually have to keep writing the same book over and over again.
Groundhog Day.
so I am working on relaunching this book and updating that. Came out like 3 years ago, and so I just have to update it, and that will be launched soon because I've promised it to another speaking client. So yeah,
I like your style.
You have a good system. I like this system. Corey, are you working on a new book?
No, we just finished Instagram for Dummies 2nd edition. So that one's put to bed. But I am assuming that probably at the end of this year, they will start talking about a 3rd edition of Instagram for Business for Dummies.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine version 10 for Instagram for Dummies? So Andrea and I, and Amy and Andrea and I wrote versions 1 and 2. At the end of version 2, Amy and I said,
we're done.
Yeah. Andrea said, I'm going to do it again.
Wrote one more. Yeah. and then it
was like, that's it. We're done.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that, Mike? Are you working on a new book? Why or why not?
I'm not. We actually had floated some ideas with Entrepreneur Press about some other similar ultimate guides, and those didn't pan out. I do want to write another book, and I've got some ideas floating around in my head, but it'll probably be more of I'm going to write it, I'm going to self-publish it, but it's going to be more like not an ebook, but a real physical book, right, that ships and everything. Just haven't landed on a topic that I'm really excited about and want to move forward with.
And for those people who are listening to this, when you're thinking about your topic, try to think about the most evergreen thing you can think of, because we all laughed a few minutes ago about writing another book because in our areas, things change so much that you do have to do a lot of updating. So what do you think, Jon? Are you writing the next book? Why or why not?
Yeah, I'm not as of right now, like similar to many here. I'm sure there's ideas percolating, but I really get back to my earlier point of I'm so interested in serving my audience rather than and when I say that, meaning actual solutions through video trainings and webinars and very specific options that serve them rather than when I say take time, it can be quite involved, right? The book the first book that I wrote, just as a side note, I know I'm taking a little more time here, but it took forever to get started, right? And this getting started thing is what I'm afraid of I'll get sucked into, and it'll just be another Google Doc with just tons of ideas and nothing happens, rather than actually getting to work and serving the audiences. And so right now, no, but I write every day because I'm serving and presenting and giving ideas and providing solutions. So, and the fact is, I love that, right? Plus, I get immediate, money back from that.
Yes. Yeah, good point. That's a very good
Oh,
point.
you're doing this for money? I didn't.
What about you, Brad? Are you working on a book?
I am not currently working on a book. I have a bunch of ideas floating around in my head that have been floating around for many months. And Andrea actually just gave me an idea that maybe I need to update my my first book, because it's probably time to do that. But yeah, I think for me, it's been hard really coming up with a great idea. I think of one of my favorite quotes, which is from Mark Twain, who said, "There's no such thing as a new idea. It's impossible. We simply take a lot of old ideas and put them into a sort of mental kaleidoscope." And that's kind of where I am in that mental kaleidoscope, because there's so much out there and you want to come up with something that's new. And yeah, I'm just not there yet.
I love the honesty. I think that's great. What about you, Kelly? Is there a new book in the offerings right now?
So I am in the middle of writing 2 different books, but neither of them have anything to do with my career. I'm writing 2 different poetry books. I'm about halfway through one of them and just starting on the other one. But the thing with me and the way I write poetry is it kind of comes in waves, and I'll be like so creative and I'm just popping out poetry for days. And I'm like, yes, but right now I'm in a lull. So I've been focusing on my business, but that's really just because I really love writing, and I've always loved writing, but discovering how easy it is to self-publish, like I taught myself, I'm like, okay, well now I have nothing that can hold me back other than the creativity that flows through me. So, and the time I have, because I am multi-passionate and I have about a bajillion different projects I'm always doing. So right now it started, I have 2 books in the works, but it's probably going to be another year before either of them are ready, just because I don't know when that creativity will hit me.
That's a great point. So here's a tip for everyone. Don't promise that you're writing a book and then 8 years later still don't have it done, because
George R.
Right?
Martin, maybe.
I was so determined to write that 3rd book, a self-published book on my time management program, and it's just been
Life
8
happens.
years since I did that. So that accountability piece is super important for some people, right? That you have to have someone around you, either in, on your team or a good friend or whatever, who can keep you on track if it's important to you.
Or a
Otherwise-
speaking client like Andrea.
Yeah.
I know.
That's very
Just
wise. I like
commit
your
to it.
style
Just-
there.
Why don't we all
Just-
use that method?
I think
Yeah.
that's a great system. Super good. And so what I'd like to do is put back to back Jenn and then Fiona on, are they working on their next book?
I am not working on another book. I keep telling them to stop. Honestly, I kind of compare writing a book to childbirth, where when you're in the throes of it, it's exhausting. It is tiring. You go, why am I doing this? Why would I do this to myself? And then the book comes out and you're like, yay, I've birthed the book and it's amazing. And everything, you forget all the bad stuff. All the late nights and all the deadlines and all the frustrations and all the editing. So yeah, it's one of those things where right now we're in a pause between, we will probably end up working on another Dummies book. It'll end up being a version 3, because we've now got 2 Dummies books with 2 versions on each. So my guess is maybe later in 2023, we'll end up working on a version 3.0. but I'm happily taking a pause from writing right now.
I'm part of a group project with Mark Schaefer. We've got a book coming out in June, which is a collaborative book where a selection of people out of his community put up their hand to write chapters to put the most amazing marketing book ever together. And I've written a chapter on community, and we've got through the editing stage now. We're just getting sent back our chapters, and each of us will be recording them ourselves. So that's something new I'm going to have to learn about, reading, spacing things out properly. Obviously, you can get other people to read it for you if you wanted, but in this case, we are all going to be recording our own chapters, which is really, really exciting. And the other thing that has done is kind of got me invigorated to actually rewrite some new chapters into Future Proof for Kids and take out some of the information. Most of it is evergreen, but a lot of it, there were areas where I reference various platforms that they just don't fit anymore because the things move so fast. So I do want to update it and keep it as an evergreen handbook that has got just valuable information for parents and grandparents, to help to continue to navigate, social media in the digital world. So yeah, it's exciting.
So that was great, and those collaborative books are so much fun. And so now I know it's top of the hour, so we're gonna get through these last two things real quick here, and I'm gonna combine a question from the audience, which is, what are your thoughts on effectiveness of learning from an ebook compared to a hardcover paperback? And the question about, what is your best tip for considering writing this book? So should they go ebook or should they go traditional? And how does a person learn as well from a hard book as an ebook? And I think I'm going to start that one with Brad.
Wow. I think the answer to that question is really very personal. Some people like to, I am one of those people that likes to hold the book. Oh, I should do it like this so you see. I like to hold the book in my hand a lot. I read books on my Kindle, but I like the feel of a book in my hand. And I like being able to write notes in the margin, and I like being able to highlight things that are important to me or that help me learn. So for me personally, I would say I want to hold the book in my hand, but I think the answer to the question really is very, very personal.
What do you think about that, Kelly?
I agree. It's very personal. Me personally, I don't want to hold anything. I want to listen. So if you have an audiobook, that's me. But I want to point out something really specific that I'm not sure is clear. Just because you don't go self-publish or just because you self-publish does not mean it's digital. So you can self-publish. I use KDP with Amazon. My books, I don't have them. My kids keep stealing all my kids' books. But they literally, you hold them in your hand and you sell them as such. And I don't have digital versions of my kids' books that I self-publish. So I just wanted to clear up that distinction. But yeah, for me, it's I'm agreed with Brad. It's a self, whatever works for you, personal preference.
And John?
Yeah, personal preference. And for me, I used to be more like you. I used to be more like Brad.
Then you grew up.
It was all about holding the books and being, touchy-feely with the books. It's just great. Now, not so much digital. And, I like to engage right at that moment. If it talks about something specific, I'm going to click over. I'm going to go to Google. I'm going to be very in the moment and take action immediately on some things that I'm reading rather than, oh, that's interesting, I'll get back to that and never do. So yeah, I'm I've changed there. Yep.
Great. And how do you feel about this, Mike?
Yeah, some of it very much the same, where I happen to like that Kindle version. I don't want the hard copy. I don't want to listen to it. I want to read it on my phone. So if it's a longer book, that's my mentality. I'm thinking I want to be able to read it digitally. But a lot of times myself and other businesses I'm talking about, and two, when we talk about ebooks, we're thinking short. We're thinking a short document that's 10, 12, 15 pages maximum, just a brief on a particular topic. And this is where I do draw the distinction. If that's our definition of ebook, then you're not going to learn as much from that kind of an ebook as you would from a longer physical. It's just not possible for me to convey as much in 12 pages as I could in 100. So if your goal is to really teach a topic, then you should be looking more of a long form book, whatever we want to call those today. I don't know.
Yeah, we actually, so a lot of terms here that we probably should discuss at some point too, the vocabulary of this whole industry. So, Corey, what do you think about this, how people should publish their own books?
Well, for me, it depends on the type of book it is. So like if it's just a work of fiction, I like to read in bed with a physical book. Like I don't use a Kindle. I like that physical book to read. But if it's a business thing and I'm on my computer anyway, then I do like having a digital copy, unless it's, if it's a book that's 100 pages, I think I would still want the physical book so I could kind of flip around. So yeah, but as you can see, you're getting all different answers. So it really is personal preference on that. And the one thing about having a physical copy is, like what Andrea was saying, if you're having a speaking gig and you want to put them on every seat, that is really nice to have that glossy, finished physical book versus, an ebook. You can't really do that. So
yeah, that's a good point. So what do you think about that, Andrea?
Yeah, I think it is very much personal preference. I like digital more often. I do have a 90-page ebook that is a lead magnet guide. So that's kind of, Mike, you were talking about size of ebooks. I do think that the promise has to be there. Like if you promise something, you're going to learn. I like to make that's the big thing for me. But I have occasionally bought the digital version, and then because I felt like it was going to be more of a reference where I want to flip around to it, I've gone and gotten the hard copy afterwards so I can, kind of flip more easily to the sections I want to revisit.
That's a great point. So let's hear from Jenn and Fiona, and then we'll be on to our lightning round.
I am a huge fan of self-publishing. I've self-published 3 books plus the 5 that I've published through publishing houses. I love self-publishing. It takes off all the burden of, you can still set your deadlines and your goals, but you're not under the gun from a publisher to meet those certain deadlines. And it gives you so much freedom and flexibility of where you want to publish it, how you want to publish it, what you want it to look like. You're not restricted by those contractual agreements that come from a publishing house. Now, of course, you also don't have the marketing. You don't have the financial incentive that comes from working with a publishing house if you're going to self-publish. But you also know that when you sell those books, that's your revenue. You're not sharing. You're not taking a royalty portion or that sort of thing. It's your revenue. So there's pros and cons to both, but I'm a huge fan of self-publishing. And if you're going to self-publish, I think Amazon's honestly the easiest in terms of being able to publish. You can do where it's, Kindle, it's digital only, or you can actually still create physical copies as well. And it's honestly a relatively easy process. They make it incredibly simple. Once you've got the manuscript, once you've got it ready to go in terms of upload and having it ready for sale. Now, of course, again, all the marketing falls on you. So again, pre-launch, tell people that you're working on the book, tell them what you're writing on, give little snippets or, screen grabs of the book to get them excited about it. Get all that, it's going to be available on X date, but, here's a way to get, an early chapter. You can give them like a chapter via PDF or something to get them excited about it. There's things that you can do to tease it and get it ready for that launch. And then of course, it's going to be up to you to keep that marketing going long term. But yeah, absolutely. If you want to dip your toes into there and you want to say you've published a book, self-publishing is absolutely a viable option.
Not sure if someone else has already said this, but number one, don't expect to make a lot of money unless you're going to write the next Harry Potter series. It's really more about, giving you credibility, and it helps to influence others when you are an author. So I think you look at it at what the book can bring to you rather than just thinking of whether you might make a lot of money. But really, in the current climate, I think my number one tip is, we're all listening about AI and ChatGPT. And whilst I think it's really an amazing tool, I think we have to be very, very careful in the way we approach it and don't use it to fully generate your content. It's still, even though it's learning voices, the problem is that it is a mathematical equation, right? So you tell it something and it's sorting through billions of tons of data and coming up with what it thinks is the most likely response it should respond to that question or whatever you pose. So you can certainly put in your own ideas and ask it to tweak it a bit, just like you could with Grammarly. But sometimes I find even Grammarly overly corrects things as well, and it can take some of the life out of your writing. So what I do believe is that ultimately what we need to think about is that what AI can't do is it can't replace your own thought leadership. It can't give you your perspective exactly how you would see it. And you want to keep that in mind. But ultimately, the quality and credibility of any book is in how the ideas and the insights are presented. And if AI helps you to do that more clearly, then go for it. But what I really do hope that people don't just use it to generate, but only use it to enhance. So hopefully that tip is useful. I think my final thought.
All right. So I just want to thank everyone right before we do this last lightning round here. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I just really appreciate your time and attention to this. You've been wonderful to work with inside this panel. We have continuing the conversation over in the Social Media Pulse community. There's the link for it. We have all the links, all the bios to everyone you've seen here today over there. You can go check out all their books. And there was a really funny post earlier about someone having to go spend a lot of money today buying all these books because some of them are amazing, right? So that I appreciate everyone so much for all of this. And I especially appreciate Ruth, who has been in the green room just producing the show and clicking all the buttons for us. And thank you for all of that. So now this lightning round, I didn't put the question here because I wanted this to be a complete surprise, but it's basically anything that we have left out of today's conversation. I know we left out Audible and AI and all sorts of things, but if there was something that you wanted to point to for someone to take the next step in their research and investigation for being a book author, what would that be? So, and quick and to the point, and let's do it. Andrea, go for it.
Yeah, I think the big thing is if you want to write a book, you have to figure out how you're going to be accountable to do it. There's so many people who say they want to write it and they keep saying they're going to do it and just promise it to a client.
There you go. Great tip. That's a great tip. Corey.
I would say just start with an outline. Just start writing down your thoughts and get them in an outline that could be, chapter specific, and just get that out there as your first starting point. And then hopefully the thoughts will flow after.
Great tip. How about you, Mike?
I would say, I'm going to echo Melanie Dietzel, is not on the call, but her and I were talking to George Thomas at B2B Forum last fall. And George was in this position where he's like, I've always wanted to write a book and I've got the whole thing mapped out. And she's like, okay, so in a year from now, when we're back at this conference, you're going to be sharing your book with us, right? And she's having him manifest the fact that he is an author and he's already thinking about now what it's like to be an author. It's the motivational technique that works for some people, maybe not for others, but try that on yourself if you need to. Think about what it will be like to be an author and imagine yourself in that role.
Right. You could just make a fake cover on a book and hold it and just see it in your hand and use that as a technique. That's awesome. Thank you, Mike. John, what's a lightning round tip that you'd like to share?
Oh yeah, so market research. Basically, who are you writing for? And as we've all been asking today, why am I doing this again? That's really my biggest thing. And what I often do, which is a tip, by the way, is if you're at a conference or in a group like this, I was going to ask you all, but we don't have time. Is basically, what are you reading now? What book are you reading? Right. So you could walk up to the speaker and ask, what are you reading? And that's going to help you sort of get insights to a little bit of that market research directly hands-on. But yeah, market research, figure out why and who you're writing it for, and forget about yourself. Think about your audience and do it.
Great tip. That's an excellent tip. And Brad.
I think I'll end where I began, and my tip would be sure to fact check ChatGPT
Yeah.
before you publish.
That's great. That's a great tip. And Kelly, what do you think about that?
I think that you should let go of perfectionism. Perfectionism killed my first book. And I learned through the Dummies series process that there's no room for perfection. You just got to get that shit done, excuse me, but like it just needs to get done. And I think a lot of times, especially as self-publishers, we maybe even if we have that deadline, we're so focused on, oh, it has to be perfect that we don't get it done. So let go of perfectionism for sure.
All incredible tips.
I have to
Yes,
hop
go
up,
ahead.
but thanks everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And,
Good to see
and
you,
I
Andrea.
appreciate
Long, so
everyone
thank
you.
so much.
I
Thank
know.
you so much. All right. I knew if this went over, we'd lose somebody, but it
Can
had
I
to
add
happen.
one more? I know that
Yes.
it's like a lightning round, but because
Yes.
it keeps coming up, and I just think I'm so passionate about this with the AI thing. Like, don't write a book with AI just because you can, because
Yeah.
the book will not perform. Like someone else said it, it's like you read the soul of someone, right? That human touch is so impactful as a reader. I can tell, like, I could tell if your heart's not in it, if you're just trying to get a book out to get the book out. Like, that is not to me a good book. So like, yes, you can write a book with AI right now. People do it all the time, but like, we don't need more noise. I've been in digital marketing way too long. I'm so sick of the noise, and I think I'm not alone in that. So can we just produce some good stuff? Like, put your heart
and
into
there
it.
and there's our challenge, and our challenge for all the authors out there listening. And thank you so much again for all of this. I can't wait to have more conversations like this in the future. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and have a great rest of your day. And remember, if you're on this panel right now, stay on until you get the little notice. We're all good.
All right.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah. Cheers.
Happy writing.
Have a good one.